This video is a complete beginner's guide to the interrelationship between sequences, tracks and programs on the Akai MPC Live and MPC X. Also, if you've gone out and bought a legacy MPC, this will also be of use to you if you've just started out and you're a bit confused as to what sequences, tracks and programs do and how they work together. I just want to say a massive thanks to everyone who subscribed. I hit a big milestone today, 1,000 subscribers, I think about 2:30 this morning. So I'm really happy about that, guys. Can't believe that I've got up to that many subscribers in pretty much 4 months since I've been doing this on YouTube. So I really appreciate the support, guys.
Come on, I got something to show you.
So the project is the very top level. And then within that project, you've got access to these 128 sequences. They're made up of tracks, okay? So within a sequence, you have access to loads of tracks, okay? So let's just tap on there. And there you go. You've got 128 available tracks. Let's just go back to track 1. Now, this is the bit that I find that a lot of beginners of the MPC format in general get confused with. Let's just say I'm on track 1 and we're using this drum program, which is program 001. This is the default program that is created automatically for you when you first boot up your MPC Live. Now, if I press this plus symbol, I can automatically create additional programs. So these are all independent from one another. And we can just use the data wheel to scroll through those programs that we've now created. And this is just one program type. In the track area here, you can see that we've got these 5 icons and they relate to the different program types, but they also tell the track what program it should be running. Okay, so let's say we had a drum program and we call this drums. If we now click on this second icon on track 1, we're not changing the track, we're just going to stay in track 1. That's now called a key group program. And as you can see, it automatically creates a new program, which is program 10. So it's still in the same order, numerical order. If we go back to drums, that's our first program, and then we should have program 2 all the way up to program 9. But we can't go beyond that to program 10 because that's a key group program. This is the type of program, the drum program, and these are the different modes. We've got drum programs, which you would load single samples onto different pads, okay? Or you could just load the same sample onto all the pads and then make different changes to the pitch and the volume. There's so many things you can do. There's so many variables involved and ways of working. Key group programs are chromatic programs. That's to say, if you load a sample into a key group program, it will now play up the scale on the pads, or if you've got a MIDI keyboard connected, it will do the same thing. Then you've got clip programs. So you'd have ideally things like drum breaks that were either 2 bars or 4 bars or even 1 bar or 8 bars, and you can launch them from the pads. But you can also have other drum breaks or other musical loops or anything else, and you can launch those samples and they're synchronized. MIDI tracks is if you want to trigger an external MIDI synth or another MIDI drum machine, or indeed another sampler. Okay, so it's now created a MIDI program for us. And as you can see with the MIDI program, it's actually given us the 001 for this MIDI 001. It doesn't create a program 11. So let's go back there. We've got a total of 9 drum programs. We've got 1 key group program, but we can't see that we've just got that one unless we turn the data wheel. And as you can see, it's either none or program 10. Clip programs and MIDI programs aren't added to that list. They're in a separate list. Okay, so we can only scroll through those in the same way. MIDI 001 and clip 001. Unless we press the plus symbol again and create additional clip programs. Okay, the last one is CV, which means control voltage, and this relates to modular systems. So on the Akai MPC X, if you've got one of those, you'll know that it has 8 additional CV outputs on the back of it, and this is for triggering external modular devices, okay, for modular synthesis. It's showing up in the MPC Live because the software or the firmware are both identical in these machines, and it's only the hardware where they are different. We've got a little warning here to say this hardware has no CV ports. That's what the different program types are, which are selectable from the track field. The edit tool here, the pencil, gives you all the options for the programs. Okay, this is the program edit menu. I'll go into detail about that in a little while. And it's the same for tracks and sequences. The pencil does the same thing, and it just gives you their respective edit menus. The A and the little cursor symbol here is just so you can rename. So another thing where I think people get confused is the relationship between one track to another. So let's just move up to track 2 now, and it's still showing us that we're using our drum program, which is fine. We can use the same program on multiple tracks. We can trigger the same notes, but if the drum program is set to monophonic mode, you will get some problems, because if you're triggering the same pads on track 1 and track 2 and they're both using that same program, they will cut each other off because it's the same program, and the MPC is going, well, you're trying to play these pads on one track and you're trying to play the same pads on another track, and they will start to cut each other off. If they're set to polyphonic, then you will be able to play them and layer them on top of one another. Now we're in track 2, we can switch our program type from the track field. So let's say we wanted track 2 to trigger an external MIDI synthesizer. If we now go back to track 1, it just jumps back to the last program that you've selected in the program field here. Okay, likewise, if we go up to track 3, let's choose track 3 to be our clip program track, or one of them. And as we scroll back down to track 2, it switches to MIDI, and track 1, it switches to drums. So we're just setting up the tracks basically. So I hope that gives you a good understanding of how the tracks work with the types of programs that you've got loaded onto them. So let's press the edit tool for the sequences. And we've got a number of options in here. Now we can erase the sequence, which will just erase all note and automation data from the sequence, depending on what you select. So let's press that. Pressing that is no different from pressing the button that's just up here. That erase button does exactly the same thing as pressing this. So I'm going to go back to the main page, and I'm going to press that erase button now without going to the edit menu. So it's just a shortcut to get to erase. You can erase a particular sequence or any given track in any given sequence, and then you can select the range. So you've got bars, beats and ticks, and you can select an exact range from where you want to delete note data from. And you can also choose whether that's all events in that sequence, which is all notes and all automation or any mutes that you've recorded. you can just isolate the automation and erase that, and it will retain your notes. That's the most handy one that I use quite regularly, because automation can be tricky sometimes if you're doing some sort of fancy movements with the Q-link knobs here and you mess up, but you don't want to erase the notes. This will just retain the notes and just clear the automation. Or you can just do the opposite of that and erase all the notes and retain the automation if you were happy with it. And then you can erase everything except the notes. So we've covered erase. Clearing a sequence will clear all data from that sequence, and it will also reset the tracks back to a default state. It will still keep the programs that you've created, but it's just erasing all the data that's been recorded into that sequence or registered within that sequence. Okay. Transpose, likewise with the erase function, will allow you to transpose a particular sequence and a particular track and the range, and also the notes or the pads that are being triggered within that sequence. You can bounce to sample, so it will bounce that entire sequence to an audio file that you can then further edit and chop and rearrange in the MPC Live. Delete bars will delete a particular range of bars within a sequence, so you can choose your sequence and then you can choose the first bar up to the last bar that it will delete. Insert bars will allow you to insert bars in the same kind of way that delete bars works. Half length, that doesn't give you a menu or an additional sub menu, it will just execute that function. So the default length for bars in any sequence when you first start up your MPC Live or MPCX is 2 bars. Because I've pressed that, you can now see it says there's just 1 bar. So let's increase the bars with our data wheel. Now we've got 8 bars to play with. And let's do that again. Half length. And now we've got 4 bars. Likewise, we can double the length. So let's press that 3 times. And we should have 32 bars. There you go. So these 2 functions, particularly the double length function, is really good, and it is a really quick way to increase the length of your sequences without having to re-record additional notes. And at the bottom here, you can copy a sequence to another sequence. So we can copy sequence 5, for example, to sequence 7. We can copy bars. So we can choose the sequence again. Okay, this doesn't allow you to choose a track. It will copy all bars of all tracks. Okay, so this is handy if you want to set a specific amount rather than using the double length function. You can also choose to merge the data or replace it completely. Events is a little bit more advanced now. So we can select particular events from a particular sequence, a particular track. Again, we've got the range. So we copy it from sequence 5, track 1, and we can copy that to another sequence or the same sequence, and also to another track. So this would be handy if you had a drum program that you liked that was on this track, track 1. Let's say you had another drum program and you wanted to just see how that would play back on the same track but in a different sequence. You could execute that function and that would do that for you. And you can choose where to copy those events from, the amount of copies, and whether it's all events or selected events. And this is pretty much done when you're in the grid editor, which is over here. So let's say we had a load of notes in our grid editor. We just select them like that. We go back to the sequence edit menu, choose events, and then if we chose selected events, it would choose those events that I've just selected in the grid editor, and it would copy those to wherever I wanted those copied to. And you can replace or merge those events. And the last one is save current sequence. If we press save current sequence, we can save that sequence or rename it and save it to a location in our directory. And that's quite handy if you've created a nice sequence and you would like to use it maybe in another project. You can also, obviously, once you save this entire project, it compiles everything anyway, and you can then go and access sequence number 5 if you really wanted to. But that's all the options there in the sequence edit menu. Now let's talk about the other options that you've got here. So we've got the BPM. Now this is where our bars loop. So if we want our bar to loop from bar 1 to bar 4 and just edit that, it's an easy way to have things looping round so we don't go all the way up to bar 32 and have to wait. Likewise, you can change the start time of that, okay? And we could just choose to loop around bar 7 and bar 8. If we turn loop off, that's quite handy if you just want to freestyle and play some notes in on the pads or on a MIDI keyboard and not have the sequence stop. And even if we've set 32 bars, if we've not got loop set on, that will start to add additional bars for us depending on how long we actually physically record for. And only until we press stop, it will stop adding any additional bars. And here we've also got the transpose function, but this is just for the entire sequence. It will transpose all notes in that sequence. It will only transpose MIDI programs or key group programs. So that's sequences. Tracks, I've taken you through this. The sequence length, at the moment, is adhering to the sequence, which is 32 bars. We can also set an independent length for every single track. So on track 1 we could have it just playing back 1 beat. Track 2 we could have it set to sequence length. Track 4 we can choose 4 beats or odd numbers, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that way you can start creating some interesting polyrhythmic music on your MPC Live or MPC-X. If you want to go and check out another video that I made on polyrhythms, please check that out, and that will show you how you can create polyrhythms in the MPC Live. We can set the overall velocity for that track, and then we've got transpose for that track. We've got transposing the entire sequence, or we've got transposing for just that particular track in that sequence. So that's all the options you get there for track. Let's go and look at the edit menu. So we can clear that track. That does the same thing as clearing the sequence. It will get rid of all the notes, but just in that particular track. We can explode this track. Now what explode does will split out all the different notes. So let's say you had a drum sound on one pad, a hi-hat on another pad, a voice sample on another pad, a chord sound or sample on another pad, so on and so forth. It would then create additional tracks. So let's say we had those 4 samples that I just mentioned. It would now create 4 extra tracks with just those samples being played on the track. It doesn't actually separate the program. The program is retained, but it will split out any notes, okay, onto additional tracks. And that's quite handy if you want to use all the features within the track mixer to separately mix all those different sounds and retain the settings within the program. There's loads of different ways you could use that and loads of reasons why you would use that, but that's what Explode does. Next options are double speed the events or half speed the events. So for example, let's say we had a drum and bass track and it was 176 beats per minute, and on this particular track we had the drums. If we press half speed events, those drums would then be spread out over a lot longer range within that sequence. Likewise, double speed would just double the speed of those events in the same way. We can copy the track, so we can copy one track to another. Let's say you had a key group program with a piano sound, and then on track 5 you had a Rhodes keyboard or something like that, or electric piano or an organ, and you wanted the notes to be copied but triggered a different program that was loaded onto track 5. That's how you would use copy track, or one example of using it. We can also bounce to sample from the track, so it will bounce a sample of just what's being played on this particular track, and it will exclude everything else. So it's similar to doing it from the sequence menu, but the sequence, as I said, will be bounced in its entirety to a sample. Bounce the sample from the track menu will bounce just that track, which is good for creating stems if you want to then further take those into a DAW. And you can also bounce the tracks to an audio track. So that will put that straight on to one of the audio tracks. And that's a track type that I haven't covered because it's not shown up in the track menu. It doesn't show up in here. You actually switch it from the bottom here. Okay, it's split off from these MIDI programs. So even though this is a dedicated MIDI program here on track 4, all these program types work using MIDI data. Audio is just dealing with samples, okay, but I'll get to that in a little while. Let's go back to the edit menu of tracks. So that's what bounce to audio track will do. It will put that entire track in its entirety onto one of the audio tracks, and you'll see that waveform data show up in the same way that you would in a computer sequencer, okay? And we can do a similar thing to exporting the sequence. We can export this track as a pattern. So any note data, it will export that just as a pattern. Okay, let's cancel that now. So that's all the options that you've got with track. So now we're on to programs. As said, this is where you select the different programs, not the program type. You select the actual programs from this field, either by double tapping, and then they would show up in this menu. We've only got one, or you would just use your data wheel to scroll between them. We've got our edit menu for our programs. So we can delete a program, we can duplicate a program. So this is really handy. So what I'm going to do is clear this entire project now and start from afresh and show you how using duplicate programs is a really handy tool. So let's go up to the folder icon up here where we can choose to save. So we can save as, or we can export our project. Again, it will just let us do an audio mix down. But I'm just going to press new, and that will completely clear this entire program and it won't save. So I'm going to press don't save. I'm going to press shift and menu, go to places. I'm going to go to my SD card, MPC Live, programs, breaks. Let's just choose this Bebop Deluxe break here. Okay, that's loaded that in. Okay, so I'm just going to record a simple pattern into the first sequence on the first track that's loaded our Bebop Deluxe drum program into, okay? So let's say I'd edited that track and I really liked how it sounded, but I wanted it to play back in a slightly different way on sequence 2. Okay, so I would go to the edit menu. I could duplicate that program now, and there you go, it's automatically put that in as Bebop Deluxe -1. So what I would do then is return it back to Bebop Deluxe, okay? Then I would go to my sequence edit menu. I would copy the sequence to sequence 2. And once you copy a sequence, it then goes straight to that new sequence that you've copied. Okay, let's go back to sequence 1. Okay, so they're both exactly the same now. We're on track 1, we're using Bebop Deluxe as the drum program. Okay, so sequence 1 and sequence 2 are exactly the same. They've got the same notes. Okay, exactly the same. Now I'm gonna go up to sequence 2 and I'm gonna switch the program to Bebop Deluxe 1. Now it will still sound exactly the same because this is an exact duplicate of our initial Bebop Deluxe drum program. But now I would go to program edit, and I'm just going to do something simple for argument's sake. I'm going to pitch those down -5 semitones. If we now go down to sequence 1, press play. Now I'm going to switch sequences Okay. And it's doing that because we haven't changed the track. Okay, so that's just a handy way, or rather a good example of showing you why it's handy to have two different programs on the same track but in different sequences. And that's a good use of duplicating programs. So you are non-destructively editing that original program basically. It's just copying that program. So let's just look at audio tracks. Again, we've got the sequence edit menu, that's no different. Okay, other than the fact that transpose is now greyed out because we can't transpose the audio track from this menu. Pressing the plus will increase the amount of audio tracks. We can record directly into that track. There you can see my voice, so let's do that. Now to record, you can't use overdub, okay? So let's take a look. Hello, my name is Tubedigga, how's it going? Let's now go into edit audio, which is down here. And there you go, we haven't recorded anything. To get back out of that, you would just press the home button here, okay? And that will take you back to the audio track field within the sequence menu. So the reason that didn't record is because you have to press the main record button here. It won't record if you press overdub, okay? You have to press this one here. So I pressed it and it goes into standby mode. And then you press play or play start. Hi, my name is Tubedigga. How are you? I'm great, thanks. Let's now go to edit audio, and there you go. Hi, my name is Tubedigga. How are you? I'm great, thanks. So that's what the record arm does. You can also set the monitor on. I'm not going to do that because I'll get some horrible nasty doubling up. But if I was to set that on now, I'd be able to hear my voice coming out of the speakers that I'm using in my studio. Okay, just so you can hear what you're recording. Now we can rename that audio track, and let's have a look at the edit menu options. So we can delete the audio track, so it will delete anything that's been recorded onto that audio track, but it won't delete the actual recording that you made. It will just delete the audio track itself. Okay, so just to show you, let's go up to audio track 8 and let's press delete. Yes. And it's jumped back down to 7, and then if we try and go up to 8, we can't because it's deleted the track. But it will retain the audio that we've recorded onto that track. We can clear regions, so that will clear any regions that we've created on that audio track. We can reset the audio track's channel strip, and we can copy this audio track. And we can save the channel strip. We've got an input configuration option here, so if we press that, we get that little side menu pop open. You can also press the I up there and that will pop that out again. And you can select which input. We can choose from these different inputs. So we can select stereo input 1 and 2, or our additional inputs 3 and 4, or just input 3, or just input 4. And then we can choose what outputs that audio track is coming out of, whether it's out 1 and 2, 3 and 4, or 5 and 6. 7 and 8 shows up again because that's just specific to the MPC X. And then we can also choose them to come out of mono. And then we can put any insert effects there onto that audio track. Set the volume, we can solo it, we can mute it, we can arm the automation, it's in read at the moment, or we can write. I'm not going to go into every other single bit of detail in the MPC architecture. This was pretty much a complete beginner's guide to the interrelationship between sequences, tracks and programs, and the hierarchy of things. And you know, I hope you picked up a few little extra tips within there as well. If you've got any comments or questions, please put them down below or send me a private message if you want. I also do Skype lessons for $45 per hour, so that's a pretty good deal. You will get all my personal in-depth knowledge of music production, sound design, and obviously MPC Live and MPCX related questions and knowledge also. It'd be great if any of you want to take me up on that. I've also got a Patreon, so if you want to head over to Patreon, support me on there, that would be a massive help to me, and that would help me continue to make these videos and improve them. So I will see you on the next one, guys. Big up yourselves. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.